Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby accepts the minutes of the September 13, 2017 meeting as submitted.
Second.
Thank you, Bob. Comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. So now we're at the part where we recognize some of our wonderful students in Mount Sinai. So,
Mr. Gray and Mr. Dara, please do the honors.
Good evening, folks. Thanks for joining us tonight. So each October, we give the PSAT to our sophomores and juniors. And then the following October, a little before October, September, we find out how well some of our kids did. So this year, we had 7 kids who were commended students in the 2018 National Merit Scholarship Program based on their performance on the PSAT in the fall of 2016. Specifically, these students scored in the top 50,000 of 1.6 million test takers. So to have 7 students from such a small high school is pretty impressive. So they are Kaya DeVerna Schuster, Damian DeMarco, Joshua Goodman, Julia McElhern, Philip Rolofson, Matthew Sirico, and Jonathan Yu. So shortly after we find out how many of our kids are considered commended students, we find out how many of our kids are going on to be semifinalists. So Jonathan has been recognized as a semifinalist, which means he is in the top 16,000 of 1.6 million test takers. We also have a bunch of students here tonight who are being commended for their performance on AP exams. So we're going to start with AP Scholar. These students have received scores of 3 or higher on 3 or more AP exams. Brittany Becker, Grace Burns, Amanda DiDonato, Nicole Gill, Jillian Kasowitz, Shannon Malloy, Brett Australia, Sydney Rao, Jillian Rink, Alexandra Sanatori, Kirsten Scutero, Tatiana Spicordo, Jake Taylor, Ruchi Thacker, and Samantha Valenti. Congratulations to our AP scholars. We also had 6 students who were recognized as AP Scholars with honors. These students received an average score of at least 3.25 on all AP exams taken and scores of 3 or higher on 4 or more of these exams. Ethan Angris, Thomas Wilkins, Anthony DeAngio, Maureen Guilfoyle, Madison McCarthy, and Celine Damien Zaman. Congratulations to our team. We had 10 students that were recognized as AP Scholars with Distinction. These students received an average score of at least 3.5 on all AP exams taken and scores of 3 or higher on 5 or more of these exams. Claire Kai, Kaya DeVerna Schuster, Damian DeMarco, Joshua Goodman, Brooke LaRossi, Ethan Ludiker, Julia McElhern, Jack Pilon, Philip Rolifson, and Jonathan Yu. Damien, come over here. Stand right here. National AP Scholars, students who receive an average score of at least 4 on all AP exams taken and scores of 4 or higher on 8 or more of these exams. Damien. Thank you all for coming tonight.
We'd like to congratulate all of these fine students, your building administrators, the board, the entire district, and certainly your parents are very proud of all of you. And that's the reason why we are Ward High School, and we get recognized by the AP itself every year. One more big round of applause as well. Mr. Dyroff, would you just require?
I'd like for them to head out. I know that they have to get home and study, but we'd like to get
Go to us. Thank you again. Thank you, parents, for coming this evening.
Hey, a true testament to our schools, number of scholars and National Merit Scholarship semifinalists. So we're very proud of here. And thank you. So next on our agenda is a school district audit review by Ms. Jill Sanders.
So difficult to follow. Presentation on students, so I will try to make this as exciting as that. It probably will not be. Anyway, thank you for the time this evening, because I do know we have a packed agenda. In front of you are draft documents, and they're as a result of the completion of our external audit for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017. I wanted to thank the Board of Education first for our planning meeting and your involvement in the process as far as understanding what we do and your input into the actual results that we're presenting. Just so the community understands, this Board of Education is very involved as far as understanding what the control structure is, understanding the financial position as it's reported on in the audit report. And we did spend probably about an hour a number of months ago to go over a few things. And so this is a culmination of our process being completed and the issuance of what's known as an unmodified auditor's report. Doesn't sound like a good thing, but it is a good thing. It's basically is that we have financial statements fairly present. In the presentation materials you have in front of you, there are 5 tabs. The first tab contains the financial statements and the supplementary schedules and our independent auditor's report. And our independent auditor's report is 2 pages, and at the top of the page is the actual opinion, at the top of page 2, which says that we feel the financial statements fairly present. The financial statements are on 2 bases of accounting, the accrual basis of accounting, and so the first 2 statements in this section, the statement of net position and the statement of activities, are on that particular basis of accounting. And as we remember, the school district maintains their books and records on the modified accrual basis of accounting. So these financial statements also include a balance sheet and a statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. And these would mirror the district's books and records and the ST3 report which was submitted to the State Education Department. Behind our opinion is management's discussion and analysis, and it's friendly financial highlights of the school district. So I'm not going to go through the whole document, I just want to make a couple of general statements. And so I know the district works really hard to put a budget together that's the Board of Education that's meaningful and that's able to be lived within, and I know that that's difficult, becomes cap constraint and the ability to fund for that. We did have positive results for the year. You do watch your budget very closely, and as you would expect, you did not spend your full budget. Okay, about 5% of your budget, 5.5% of your budget was not spent. On the revenue side of your budget, you received a little bit more state aid than had been anticipated, and that gave you the ability, as you know, to return some money to the taxpayers to reduce the subsequent year's tax levy, and also to be able to fund some money into the retirement contribution reserve. And we know that those particular areas of funding, the 2 retirement systems, those are underfunded at this particular point. The contribution rates have been coming down, but we do know that the contribution rates in years past have been very, very high. Teachers' retirement system was 18%, employees' retirement system over 20%. And so to the extent that you have this reserve authorized under general municipal law, and you do fund for it and you utilize it through the budget process, it's a very good thing, because the rates are down 50% and change for the employees' retirement system, less than 10% for the teachers' retirement system. The likelihood is because those 2 systems are underfunded, and you'll see that in the financial statement on a reported basis, that you will be in a situation that you will need to be able to fund for this prospectively in your budgets, and that gives you the ability to do that. So you did have positive financial results during the year. Because of those positive financial results, one of the things that we look at is the rating system that you get. So Moody's rated the district AA3, which is a good rating system. And that means that when you have to borrow on a short-term basis, as we know, or a long-term basis, the amount of interest that you're incurring is going to be at a much lower rate than a district that does not have the financial condition that we have. We have in the first tab behind the financial statement what's known as the Yellow Book report. And so the Yellow Book report is back on page 57 after the disclosures. And so because you do expend federal funding, and you received almost $1 million in operating grants during fiscal year 2017, the district is required to have 2 levels of audit. One is an audit in accordance with generally accepted government auditing standards, and one is an audit in accordance with the Single Audit Act and uniform guidance. This report that we're looking at here on page 57 is the report in accordance with generally accepted government auditing standards. So what the federal government wants us to report on is whether or not the district has internal controls over financial reporting, which you do, okay? You do not have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. So these would be breaks in the internal control structure that might lead to a possible misstatement of financial statement results or misappropriation of assets. So you do have a strong internal control structure in place. And the federal government also wants us to report on at the top of page 58 whether or not you are compliant with laws and regulations over the administration and spending of federal dollars that you get. And so those are 2 positive reports that you've received with respect to your federal funds that you've been spending. Behind tab 2 is a note that tells you that we're still in the process of working on a federal single audit. That has a different deadline for filing. As you know, the State Education Department and the Office of the State Controller want your financial statements, the ones we just reviewed, by November 15th. The single audit under uniform guidance is due to the Federal Single Audit Clearinghouse by March 31st, 2018. So we're in the process of, we've done our single audit determination, we're in the process of completing the procedures on those, and we will be compliant with the filing date. I think we probably will have a report ready for the Board of Education by the end of this year. Behind the next tab is the extra classroom activity funds financial statement with our independent auditor's report. And so we know that these really are not under the control of the business office, and they are not district funds, but the state education department wants us to report on the controls over the student money. What do the receipt procedures look like? What are the processes as far as cash disbursements? How do the records look? And we have very good controls over this. And we're also supposed to be looking at the independent activities of clubs that are part of the total extra classroom activity fund. So behind our two-page independent auditor's report, you'll see on page 3. First, you'll see the high school clubs and activities that have been authorized by the Board of Education, what the beginning balance in the cash account was for each of them, what was collected and transferred in, and what was dispersed and transferred out, and the ending cash balances. And then, so on the top half, as I said, high school, and then on the bottom half of the page, you'll see the middle school results. There are some disclosures on page 4 about that financial statement. And the thing that's very different about that is the cash basis. So unlike your general purpose financial statements, which are modified pool basis for pool basis, the thing that may look odd about each of the individual balances, you could be looking at a club account at June 30th that has a lot of money, but then they went ahead, that particular club, and decided we want to do this activity in September. And so the cash balance on September 30th would look very different. Behind the next tab is what's known as the management letter. So our process starts with a risk assessment. What is the internal control structure of the checks and balances? And the checks and balances are very good. There's segregation of duties, which means there's more than one set of hands that touch a transaction. And to the extent that that may not be possible because it's not cost beneficial, there's what's known as mitigating controls. So mitigating control would mean that I have an employee in the course of doing their work that would be touching upon something else that someone does from a financial standpoint to see whether or not there could have been an error that could have occurred. And so the controls are very good. We don't have any communication of internal control deficiencies. We need a separate report to the Board of Education. This report includes some comments that we shared with the Board of Education last year. We have no new comments. And when you look at the document, you'll notice that there's only 2 comments that we carried forward. Okay? And the final comment on the bottom of page 2 with respect to the check signature processes, the district has implemented additional procedures in order to address those comments that we brought forward to the Board of Education last year. Computer permissions has to do with the financial package, and what happens is when the financial package gets updated, just so that everyone knows, those permissions are assigned collectively to everyone, and then you have to go through the program and pull out all those permissions that may not relate to someone's particular job responsibility. And so there were a couple of permissions. We didn't see anything that was problematic as far as transactions, but we're just suggesting that, the physics office review these again and remove some of the permissions that were automatically assigned on the update. Behind the next tab is my communication to the board. It's under AUC 260. And this document talks to you about whether or not the audit was performed in accordance with the standards, which are U.S. generally accepted auditing standards, government auditing standards, and uniform guidance under the Single Audit Act. So we did perform our audit in accordance with those standards. At the top of page 2, we talk about some required supplementary information. So we know that the state wants to see certain schedules as far as funding of the post-employment benefits. They want to see the calculation of whatever the fund balance is. And so this addresses the inclusion of those statements in schedules in this particular financial statement. We had no significant audit findings at the bottom of page 2 and up to the top of page 3. And we talk about some of the things that there are estimates that are involved in useful life of capital assets. The district has actuarial services utilized to actually calculate their OPEB liability and workers' compensation and the pension amounts that they report in the financial statement. So there are certain actuarial assumptions that we use and estimates, so that's addressed in the first part of that. In the middle of page 3, we had no difficulties encountered in performing the audit. Corrected and uncorrected misstatements. The district, Mr. Johnson, keeps a very good set of books. We had one proposed journal entry at the tail end of this document, and it's just the way that installment purchase debt has to be reported on the ST3 and for my financial statement purposes. I have to tell you, I will share this with you. We are auditors for many school districts. I rarely have school districts that have one adjusting journal entry. So, I mean, that should give the Board of Education some comfort of the information that's coming to you throughout the year, that it's good and accurate information. No disagreements with management, and at the conclusion on page 4, we ask for a representation letter, just so that we know that all the information that we need in order to complete that audit, if we do not have a scope limitation. And then the other matter that I'm bringing to your attention at the bottom of page 4, you might remember we talked about this at our planning meeting. Other post-employment benefits on the accrual basis financial statement has to do with health insurance benefits that you're contractually obligated to pay for retirees. And the way that this works is you need to report it on your financial statement, your accrual basis financial statement. You're paying for that cost every year out of your budget, as every other school district and local government is. But under GASB, you're required for financial statement reporting purposes. And if you, we're going to just ask you to look, if you could, at page 51. So at the top of page 51, the actuary takes census information from the school district, trends the healthcare cost, and makes a determination based upon mortality tables in place, how long will the district be paying for retirees' health insurance. Uses a discount rate. The discount rate used by the actuary is 5%. And then comes up with this number that you can see as of July 1st, 2016. Why is it every other year? Because you're not required to pay for that valuation every year. You pay for it every other year. It comes up with a number of almost $46 million of liability. Okay? And that would mean if you have a place to put $46 million to pay for the cost of everyone's health insurance who you're committed to pay for from here until the time that they pass, that's the amount of money that you would need based upon 5% discount. It's just for reporting purposes, but the reason why I'm bringing it up is because GASB 75 is going to replace GASB 45. Okay? And so GASB 45 said amortize that amount over 30 years, and when you looked at your financial statement back on page 16, and this is for reporting purposes, if you look at the total liability section, there are long-term liabilities here. You'll see net of the post-employment benefit obligation of $16.7 million in round numbers. This is the amortized piece of what you need to report, okay? Because as of this particular date on the 30-year amortization, that's your potential liability. So that's under GASB 45. Under GASB 75, which is effective for next year, that full $45 million that we looked at, that actual accrued liability, will be replacing that $16 million number because there's no more amortization allowed. Okay? So we know that this is a reporting model. We know it will create a deficit by picking up another unfunded liability. It's not a budgetary deficit. It's not an operating deficit. It's a reporting deficit. Okay? And as we know, just like any other long-term debt that you have, you fund for it out of your budget appropriately every single year. This goes towards full balance sheet disclosure of every liability, whether it's funded out of the budget or and due within the next year or due 10 or 15 years from now. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention because that's going to be a big change in the reporting process. And that's pretty much all that I have. Any questions? Yes.
Jill, on page 8, looking at revenues versus expenses compared with 2016 and 17, our change is we've seen an increase 1.53% in revenue. And if I come over to the charts, we do see some operating grant increase, we see some state sources increase. Those are the big changes, and that's what that comes from.
That's what that comes from. So you received a bit more state benefit than you had expected.
And when we look at property taxes and store, we see a slight decrease based on that allowed us to tax less in that period of time.
Your levy increase was very, very small, 0.56%, I think it was, and it translated into, as far as the total part of the revenue pie, that's correct, only 66.2% because you did recognize more state aid.
And we've seen a 1.53% increase in revenue,
Yes, correct.
whereas we see a 10.38% increase in expenses, of which a sizable portion of that is benefits, including post-employment benefits.
That's correct, and the change in the teacher's retirement system cost. Because on this, and that's a very good question, on this accrual basis financial statement, you might remember last year, the teacher's retirement system was more than 100% funded. So when you were reporting expenses for the retirement system for this presentation, that was a benefit, it was not an expense. And so now we're underfunded, so you have a swing of $3 million just for that.
And in looking at this difference, we're looking at a difference between a slight raise, 1.53 in revenue, driven by state aid or other grant, not taxes, and we're seeing a sizable increase on our expense going forward, plus next year when GASB 75 kicks in, we won't be having the benefit of amortization and we will see the whole charge. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank
Great
you
job,
very
as
much for your
always,
time.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we're up to our assessment presentation, so. Superintendent first, Mr. Rosen.
Hope you're all listening, there's going to be a quiz on that. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we'll present our state assessment, Regis, and AP data. But before we do, it's important to note that New York State Education Commissioner Mary Ellen Elliott, since taking office, has made numerous changes to the grade 3 through 8 assessments in an attempt to increase student participation rates. In 2016, the number of questions on the math and ELA tests were reduced, and there was a reduction in the amount of reading passages. The test became untimed, so that students had more time to demonstrate what they know and can do, and work at their own pace. In general, this means that as long as students are working productively, they will have as much time as they need to complete their tests in the confines of the regular school day. In addition, Commissioner Elliott invited teachers to participate in the writing of the test questions, which addressed the concern of the New York State United Teachers Union. More than that, the number of actual testing days has been reduced from 3 to 2 days of testing. In spite of these noble efforts, student participation rates throughout the state continue to decline. However, in Mount Sinai in grades 3 and 4 and 5, we saw a slight increase in participation and some other positive indicators which we will point out. Evidently, teachers and parents are still reeling from the simultaneous release of the Common Core standards, if you remember them, now the new generation standards, and the new teacher evaluation system, which holds teachers accountable for their student scores. Many people are still angry and continue to mistrust the state. But the data is what it is and is reported on the district's report card. The assessments provide the district, teacher, and parents with valuable information regarding how the students are progressing towards success on their Regents exams and where their strengths and weaknesses actually lie. But this assessment score is only one indicator regarding a student. There are many more, such as classroom performance, class participation, teacher recommendation, Ames Web, and now Fontes and Pinnell results. Meanwhile, we continue to look at the assessment results and learn what we can from the information that it provides. Hopefully the state will find or create assessments that parents believe in and that provide teachers with essential feedback that will allow them to adjust instruction to better help students progress towards mastery and standards. And we'll be presenting that information to you now. The board, join me down below, please. Before we start, I'd like to thank Dr. Timo for spending a great deal of time creating this presentation, gathering all the data, bringing it all together as she does every year. Thank you very much. And our administrators are here to support us this evening. We're already met Mr. Grable, Mr. Dyroff. Our new elementary school principal, Rob Catlin, is here. Andy Matthews, Director of STEM. Frank LaBianca, Humanities. Mr. Peter Pramateris in middle school, and they're here to support and add to enhance our presentation. So the good thing, when we look overall at our report card, all of our buildings are in good standing, and our high school, again, is a reward school. And we congratulate, again, all of those students who did this. This is the participation rate I just referred to in my opening address. And as you can see on the bottom line, we continue to go down in our participation rate. Now it looks pretty, as you go from year to year, not in 14, for example, in ELA, we're at 82%. This year we're 40. It's also important to note that the year before, in 2013, we were always at 98 and 99% participation. Before the waiver, you needed 95% is acceptable to the state if you make AYP. As you can see, we're far below that. And how are we in good standing? Because there's a waiver right now that excuses districts. Because the New York State doesn't know what to do with all of the refusals. So, as my little reference before is, I don't know if it's optimism or what, but with grades 4 and 5, there's a little jump in participation rate. On the right, you'll see that we actually went up from last year in math. And again, 4 and 5 is a little different than the other grades. I'm not sure what's going on there, but they're a jump, and I'm a little happy about that. But for 40%, as I mentioned, what do you really tell as a district with 40%? Not a lot when you compare to other districts. We don't know who's taking their test, who's not. If everyone was at 95% of their student body taking it, you'd have a grounds to compare districts. But when schools are 40, and we're among the highest, there's some with 8 participation rate, 12, 20, and I don't know when it will ever come back, only because people still mistrust the state, and we have a larger, the state claims 20% statewide refuse. But on the island, it's a whole different story, as you can see with us. Okay, you know what the levels mean. Level 4, level 3, 2, 1. Gina, do you want to discuss the results, please?
The reason why the schools are in good standing, I'll just also add, it's not only based on participation rate, it's also based on how our students perform on assessments. So since it switched to Common Core, and we're now designated either as a school in need of improvement, which we've never been, or a school in good standing, it's really based on, they look not only at these results in terms of how many of our students scored 3 and 4, but they also look at the gaps of students. They look at gaps based on race and ethnicity, they look at gaps based on how our ESL students do versus our general population, and also our special education students. We have no gaps at this point in terms of the data. So we're functioning pretty equally, and our students are performing well. 3s and 4s, they have 59% in 3rd grade, and I know that went up slightly since the year before. That's a strong performance. I know you say 59%. I won't be happy until we have 90 to 100% of our students having completed. But 59% is actually very strong, as to see that. We're taking a look at what, Sixth grade ELA, because it seems to have gone down, there could be a function either of the cohort group of students, or it could be a function of this year's test. We did this year pilot computer-based assessments in fourth grade, and fifth grade was ELA, not right? Fifth grade? We're going to be doing the same thing this year, except fifth grade will be taking computer-based for both assessments. We find our students did really well with the computer-based assessments. They didn't need a lot of additional time. They found it fun and easy to do, much better than reading the passages on paper and filling out things paper pencil. So I think that that's the way that we're going to be moving. Our math scores are strong, and again, in many of the grade levels, they've gone up. So our performance here is either equal to last year or a little bit better than last year. Every year when I do this, I can't present our science, even though we know what our science scores are, we're able to get that information to the teachers, and there is a lot of information that comes along with the assessments. P-values for every question, so we know what questions our students answered correctly. The teachers can look at that. We can see if there are standards that they need to hit this year that they maybe didn't spend so much time on last year. So there's a lot of information. But the data for the science, and it's interesting because this is the one test that hasn't moved to the Common Core. It's still the science test that's been given since the 1990s, 2000. Last year, 2016, I couldn't present our 16 results when I did this, so I'll present them now. We're always strong. I think every year have been 94% or above. Some years 99%. So our science scores are always strong in fourth and eighth grade. Regents results, again, it's based on a 0 to 100 standard scale, and that's important to remember. If a student gets a 65, it does not mean that they got 65% of the test correct. And where that cutoff is depends on the assessment, and it changes every year. And each assessment is different. So just bearing in mind, an 85 to 100 is mastery, a 65 and up is passing. And the safety net that I've listed there, it's a little different and it's a little complicated. I'm not going to go into the whole explanation. But for special education students, they do have a safety net available to them, and they're able to receive a 55 to a 64 so that they can receive a local diploma. I know this is a busy slide, but I tried to include as much as I could. I have number of students, 2017% passing, 2017% mastery compared to 2016. And as you can see, our results are very strong, and that's why our high school is a reward school. It is based on this information as well as the graduation rate of the high school. 98% passing in living environment is terrific. We usually get results like that every year for the living environment. Also, 71% mastery is very high. I think we're going to be one of the top in our neighboring districts for that. I can't discuss results from other districts because that is not even available to me, and it won't be released in the spring when the report will officially come out. Last year, I think I was able to compare us to Three Village because they had done their presentation the month before we did ours, so I had that data available. As long as they presented publicly, I'm allowed to use it. They're presenting theirs tonight as well at the same time, so I should have those tomorrow. Chemistry results were strong again this year, and the Common Core Algebra, that's interesting to note because this is the third or fourth year we gave the Common Core Algebra 1 because 1 year was a transition year and we gave both assessments. But our mastery rate has been increasing and our passing rate is very strong. Our 8th grade population, that's why some of the results for the 8th grade math you saw was low. That's because they take the Common Core Algebra 1, and many of our students do. And when you look at the Regents data a little bit later, those students in grade 8 that took the Common Core Algebra 1 this year, 100% passed, and I believe it was either 71 or 81% word mastery. So again, very strong results from the middle school. Algebra 2 Trig is no longer given as of last year, and it will be discontinued. And we moved to the Common Core Algebra 2 the first year. You can see a big change now that our students and our teachers are used to the standards for that course and the information that is needed for the assessment. We moved from a 4% mastery and 75% passing to a 35% mastery and a 99% passing. that's probably going to be one of the tops in the area too. I think a lot of other districts really struggle with the other two. The geometry, I know some of you who had students take the geometry, there were 3 questions that were challenged. State ed did go back. We did rescore every assessment within a 2-day time period, and the students were given credit for multiple answers for those 3 questions. So that reflects the rescored assessments.
Mount Sinai also joined other superintendents writing a letter to the state saying what a terrible test that geometry test was.
Humanities, we have U.S. history, again, strong performance, dropping off a little bit in mastery, but global history is going up in mastery rate and also passing rate. And the Common Core ELA, again, driven percentage of mastery, but a strong passing rate.
Okay. We had a lot of folks up here because of their success on the AP exams. These are the dressing reads, and again, I invite principals, directors to join us in the discussion if they'd like. But an important thing to note that's different in Mount Sinai than other districts. We have an open enrollment in AP classes. And I know Matt and Rob and probably the directors go around and ask kids who are what we call normal average Regents kids, but a little higher, do you want to challenge yourself and go into an AP class? So we generally have a lot of larger numbers. Am I saying that right, Rob?
Yeah, so over the past several years, we have been challenging kids to challenge themselves a little more in the classroom. And over the course of that time, we've gone from running 2 AP courses in each subject to sometimes 3, even 4 sessions in those courses. At the risk of the scores going down slightly, but we do that because we feel the rigor of the course is preparing them for the next level, which would be the college level. And it also translates to stronger Regents exam scores as well. So to compare us to other local schools where they're only offering these courses to the honors kids, so to say, where we're opening up to anybody who's 85 or better, wouldn't be comparing apples to apples. Not to mention that some schools don't even make all the kids take the exam, so that would skew the comparison a little bit as well.
Right. Quite unique compared to a lot of other districts.
Correct.
So you'll see in the English area, not necessarily lit comp, language comp, English language comp, we dropped considerably in 3 to 5. Is it the open enrollment that did that? What is it? Social studies, you'll see a drop as well. 60% 3s and 5s down to 43, 98, 5, that's not so much. 55 to 48. Those areas, gentlemen, I'll open up to the principal and directors again. Was that a concern when we saw those results?
There was a couple,
Anytime the scores dip, it's always going to be a concern, and it warrants some digging to find out. There are some internal variables that we are going to take a closer look at. And again, cohorts change as the years move on, so we need to keep that in mind as well. But I think the important piece is that over the past 5 years, we went from, Matt, correct me if I'm in the ballpark, we went from writing 350 exams to over 500 exams. So in 5 years, right?
Yeah, we're up over 500.
526.
So we have a lot more kids taking advantage of the opportunity to take AP courses. And we have been encouraging kids to at least take 1 AP course, all kids, before they graduate. So that's been a goal of ours.
Gordon, this is a classic example of not getting lost in the numbers and looking at what the students are achieving. Because when they're coming out of these AP classes, they're coming out with a level of study skills that they're not otherwise receiving, and they're much more prepared for hitting the freshman year running. They have a different method of studying, a different method of outlining their material. They're left to be much more independent. The worth of a student having a 2 in AP is not necessarily for the purposes of, what will it happen, do I have to take that class again in college? It's what we should be doing in terms of having students able to do that. And I I don't want people to get lost in these numbers. What they should be hearing is that in a small district, we have 580, 520 kids taking AP across our high school. That's huge.
That's a quarter of our student body. Matt?
Just to couple of Bob makes, we're fortunate that we are a small enough district and we become pretty acquainted with our students, and our alumni do come back. And just recently, I was talking with probably about a dozen or so kids, asking them questions regarding their acclimation to college and things of that nature. The same answer from two students that I had gotten, which over the past years I hadn't received, was I said, hey, what do you think we can offer our students more to help you bridge that gap? Two students at two different times gave me the answer, having more kids take an AP exam for that very reason that Bob just explained. So it sort of validated what we've been doing as administrators in the high school, trying to find those kids and push them up a little further and challenge themselves.
I think we're fortunate that the board has supported us for a number of years to have our 85 average students in that class. Far more rigorous, and it obviously affects our Regents results.
And just a quick credit to our instructional staff. When we began this initiative of encouraging kids to challenge themselves, there was no resistance about bringing those kids into their classrooms. They welcomed and opened those kids.
Biology, chemistry, environmental science, calculus AP. Any of you know Gary Kulik and calculus, we just think calculus. He's an amazing man. Amazing. Statistics, computer science, physics 1. Physics 2 was interesting, but the N, the number, is very small in that class. So anyone who does not get the 3 affects that number greatly. But others, for the most part, you see the AP results are going up. And again, you see the hundreds, but the numbers, now, those are misleading because studio and art and design, those are about 12 kids in those AP classes. Music theory. We've had discussions right in this very room during budget time. What do you do about low enrollment in certain classes? And speaking with my colleagues, the answer always is you can't place a minimum on AP classes when it presents an opportunity for these kids to benefit from being in an AP class. Those aren't true numbers, but those ends are small in those classes. But it's, again, kids participating in the AP experience. Okay. This is pretty big right here. And again, working in 2 former districts, we would love to have had numbers like this. Graduation rate of 98%. Regents with advanced designation, not just a Regents diploma, not just an advanced designation, but with honors, 38% of our kids. Then the Regents designation, that's 81% of our kids with an advanced Regents diploma. And then the Regents diploma, you'll see, and they're in the minority. Most of the kids get advanced Regents diplomas. And 3 are local, for various reasons. And again, I find great numbers. You combine the top 2, 79%. You'll see some districts with almost a balance of 4-year and 2-year colleges. We're far ahead in the 4-year college. You combine the 2, what are you at? 97% of our kids go to college. And 1%, 1%, we'll say 1% up. Pretty impressive numbers. And that's it. Questions? Mike?
I have a question in regards to the algebra regions. The algebra regions is a rubric of grading, and I don't know if it's changed since I used to be able to see the rubric.
You guys hear Mike over there?
My question is, I used to be able to see the rubric on the algebra exam regions. Back then, when I got to see them, a 38 gross score was a passing 65. Is that still the same, where the rubric still has that Because the question becomes, the parents don't realize what the children get to get to 65. They don't know if they got 65 or 67, but they actually only know like 40% of the material, sometimes even less. Then they go into geometry, and they're wondering why the kid's struggling in geometry, but they only know 40% of the material. It's like knowing 40% of your ABCs in kindergarten, and you go to the first and say, I can't read.
Well,
So,
yes, the
But
rubrics
can we
are
give that
still
information?
listed, and every year, like I said, when I was presenting, it changes. Every year, the number, the raw score number changes.
but can we give that information to the parents so the parents
It's on,
realize?
yeah, it's on the New York State Ed website, it's public
But
knowledge.
the website, but parents don't go to that website, once they see the score, they go, oh, my kid got a 65 or something, 67. But really, gross score information-wise, they only know like 40%, and that may help
Right,
them.
like I said, that's not a percentage of getting, you didn't get 65%.
I understand that,
Right.
but I'm saying parents don't understand.
Right.
I've had conversations with parents
The other
who
issue
have
is-
problems with geometry, and I've asked them how they've done in the math and algebra, and they said, oh, my kid just barely passed, got 65, 67, and I said, do you realize that's not the amount of material that they actually know?
Right.
So that's my question, is it possible to let the parents know, like, star or something, so they know that their kid doesn't know 65% of the material?
We did, it's discussed, yeah.
But it's doing it every year, like you said.
It changes every year.
Right, but it's a magic chart, it's a conversion chart, it's not a whole rubric, it's a conversion chart for part one and part two.
Right.
That then converts into a score that can be understood in terms of 65, you know, from 100, scale of 100. The other piece is that algebra is the only regents that's required for Regents. So,
Right,
when we talk about that, that's why the state kind of plays with the numbers every year.
My question is, when I have a conversation with parents, they teach so many regions, and I ask them about the
Yeah, I mean, I've sat with Mr. Matthews and reviewed Regents exams with parents to go over like what they got right or wrong. I would imagine that he's done it at the high school more because in theory we only have it for the accelerated students, so they usually typically get 85 or better mastery. So I know Andy sat down with parents who've gone through.
Those are the ones who were,
And we
Asking for it.
explain the conversion charts to those parents who, if they want to put a kid in lab class, they ask why. Well, at the end of the 70, if they really didn't get 70, they really got 42.
right.
You know, we can show them those conversion charts. So you go on the, just type in New York State Regents,
Right.
click on the
I
Regents.
think it helps the parents for the sons, right, they want to get them extra help and stuff. Yes.
In middle school, they were taking their tests, what grade level were they taking their tests on computers?
For this year, for last year?
Yeah.
Only 50.
Last year, only fifth grade did computer-based testing, correct, because we felt like the elementary school had done it the year before, so they were familiar with the program. Now, this year, fifth and sixth, because again, we're trying to roll it in where kids are familiar with the program. So it will grow eventually, because that's where the state's heading, they're actually eliminating paper-based testing. So we're phasing it in as the state allows us to. So they allow you to choose right now, and in the next years, they're not going to allow you, you're going to have to go computer-based testing. So we're doing it as kids are starting at the elementary school. We figured we'd roll it in, because that's the right way to do it, so kids are more familiar with it.
And what are you doing, what are you doing about the low scores with the English? I was very disappointed in English.
Which English? Is it grade, sixth grade?
We have to do it longitudinally too. I know that if you look at our scores from year to year, it's a cohort. You can't go from like one year to the next. You have to go diagonally. So if you look at that, it really wasn't much drop. We didn't have a huge drop in any grade. And then we also have to account for 5%. Because you go like 16, if you look at grade 5, it's really only 5%. So in terms of statistics,
Take the PSATs, the SATs. If he's going to be a lawyer, he could take the exams Mr. Sweeney has taken. Dad, I'm really nervous. I don't want to take this. Don't worry, Kenneth. Or graduate exams. I feel sorry for students who are in ninth grade and never took a high stakes test, and then suddenly you go, take this test, you better pass it because you have to graduate. Suddenly. And I don't know if that's fair to the child. So there's a lot of mixed things. Do I trust the test? No. And I don't think the state's ever going to get that trust back. I really don't, unless they separate teacher's evaluation from the test to start, and then get more parent involvement. She's guessing, it's not working. Yes,
I'm so frustrated by this conversation, and I hate to be the...
so do I.
I hate to be that opinion and have that be what my voice is, but I can't help myself. The fabric of our community, I mean, everybody in administration over here is telling us that 500 and some odd kids are taking AP classes. These kids, we just saw this display of the amazingly talented, smart kids that we have here. I love the fact that my kids just think, of course I'm taking AP, that's what everybody does. That has become the culture here. However, it has also become the culture here that we accept less than mastery on our Regents exams. We accept it, we roll over it, we don't ask kids to take the exam again. My kid thought, he's a 10th grader, he thought that he could only take it again if he failed. He didn't even know that it was an option to him until I said, wait a minute, my niece McCormack takes it every time she doesn't make mastery,
Take it as
so then
many
she
times as you
does.
want.
And then, when I asked the question to our administration here, I couldn't, and really still can't, although they are trying to get me an answer. Somebody is trying to get me an answer. I'm not sure if we have a diploma distinction that says you have mastered all of your Regents exams, or do you only need 4 to make mastery? And
Yes, no, those designations, that advanced designation means that you've taken 8 Regents exams and passed them. The advanced with honors means that you've taken the 8 Regents exams necessary and you've passed them with an average of 9 to 11.
an average, so you don't need mastery on all of them.
Correct.
So for instance, my son right now has taken 4 so far as a 10th grader. He has mastery on 3, he missed geometry by a point. I wanted him to take it again, but when I asked, I was told it doesn't matter if he takes it again because we don't have any kind of distinction for mastery. When I followed that up again with somebody else in administration, I was told, oh no, we do, but he doesn't need it on every one. And at that point, before I got clarification, August came and went, and now my son's a quarter of the way into Algebra 2. I'm certainly not going to have him go back and take the geometry Regents now, but I want to know if he's, you know.
If he got 90s, if he takes 8 Regents exams, and
Right.
gets 90s on 6 of them, gets a 91 and an 89, he will get 8 with honors.
Okay.
If he
So
takes
needs
them
an
and
average of
passes
90
the
out
8,
of 8.
he will get Regents with advanced designation
Okay.
for just 65 and above on 8.
Right. So the highest distinction that we get is you take 8 Regents exams and an average of 90 on
On the 8.
And that's correct? Okay. The other part, and thank you for that clarification. The other part of my frustration sitting here is I cannot get past this. We're counting these Regents exams as 20% of our students' grades, and in some instances, there are some teachers here who also counted in their 4th quarter grade, besides counting it for 20% of their overall grade. And if you look back to the slide that you had before, where we're showing Algebra 2 from last year, it had a 4% mastery rate. So I want to know how that is
It's
not.
well, I can tell you that.
Go back.
Okay, so the Common Core
An
Algebra
exam is
2
brand new, and they'll tell you about guessing, you know, what book you
No,
had,
I do understand.
first time through.
Those students also took the Algebra 2 trig, so 45% were advanced.
Okay, so that was the year they had a choice between they could take both and one counted and one didn't. I'm sorry.
Teachers decided to use the Algebra 2 trig curriculum, not the Algebra 2 Common Core.
Right, so the 20,
We
okay,
had to administer both exams.
right,
They only had to pass one.
the higher score counted.
Our
in their
teachers
grade.
were beginning to put the Common Core Algebra 2 into the curriculum, but hadn't fully implemented it until this year where the scores shot up.
Right, well, I'm troubled by, it did shoot up, I mean, tremendously from 4 to 35.
We didn't
And I've discussed this with you, Mr. Matthews, on the phone. To me, like when we look at geometry and we're talking about 23%, these are your honors kids. A lot of them are very high achieving kids, and they cannot come out of this test with an 85. And to me, that's very troubling. It's troubling in and of itself. It's a reflection on the teachers, on the curriculum. It's a reflection on a whole bunch of different things, the test being an awful test. But we're, as a district, deciding to count this test for 20% of our students' grades, and I think that puts us at a huge disadvantage.
Are you aware there's a committee meeting regarding that 20%?
I know, I've been told that this committee has formed, that it was full of a
It's
lot of
met,
teachers
it's
and
gonna
only
continue to
one
meet.
outspoken parent who, to
Were
me.
you here in August when I presented?
I was, yeah, and
Good.
you and I have had
Did you hear
multiple
what
conversations about this.
Districts who do not, did you see what districts who did not count the Regents as part of their final grade? What the results were?
And I know some districts that, you
And with
know,
our neighboring
there's
district who counts
a
at 10?
variance. You know, maybe we don't need to count it as 20%. Maybe we need to have one of these no harm policies like some of these other districts have. You know, I think that this is troubling. And like I said, the fact that these, you know, expectations, we want our kids to opt into all these tests and we want them to take AP classes. My kids do it. That's the expectation I have of them too. But I also expect that their grade is going to reflect some kind of fair assessment. And I don't think that the Regents exam in math
I'll let
is
Mr.
fair.
Grable comment on your concern.
I am in the middle of heading a small committee of teachers, parents, administrators, and we are gathering data to analyze the impact of using Regents exam scores in the calculation of students' final GPA. I've had one meeting thus far. We have another meeting scheduled at the end of October. By the end of November, that committee will have a recommendation from Mr. Brosdale on how to do that. And there's been several scenarios visited, 20%, 12%, 15%, 10%, and how those numbers change when you change the percentage of the Regents exam score in that GPA calculation. And then there's been some discussion about a harmless type of policy where only if it helps the kid's grade will count it and only if it doesn't. But there are many and varying opinions within the members of this committee that we will continue to discuss and consider, weigh them all out within a month or two, and then have a recommendation from Mr. Brosdale to share with you.
And I think you have to understand another piece of that, just like I was talking about the conflict, the APPR and Common Core. My wife's a teacher at high school. I taught high school for 32 years. I taught Regents classes. When my APPR score results are based on how well those kids do in that Regents exam, I want them to be serious when they take it. I want them to do their best. A lot of times, they have here because we call it 20%. If you look at the math between 20 and 10%, you might be talking a point in their final average, or 0.5, the most. But to me, I'm reconciled to the people who are getting evaluated based on the Regents results. I would never make a decision as a board to say to our teachers, no, it's only going to count 10.
Right,
That's
but
it. And I know there are students, believe it or not, great district or not, you tell them it's 10 or 20, the foot comes off the gas pedal a little bit. I believe that. You disagree? I don't. No, I've been in 3 districts. I don't. Mike?
The question in regards to that, worrying about the final grade, taking it away from the Regents, which is something that's, really, like I was saying about math. But it gives you a comparison of how you're doing with the rest of the state. And your final grade in whatever class you're in doesn't really make a difference in colleges, because colleges say the grades don't mean anything to us. If we're going to use grading, we're going to use the SAT, we're going to use the ACT, we're going to use your AP exams, your mastery, and so forth. The reason being is because one school may use 10% of it, another school may use 50% of it. Don't you want to know what your kid does and reflect against that knowledge, or are you just attempting to get a high grade and the underlying doesn't matter?
I stand, we have been successful at 20%. We're looking at this, other districts were challenged. Rocky Point is 20. They put it in the hands of the teachers decided to stay at 20. Willow Place, our neighbors went down to 10. They won't even share their reading scores with me anymore. They won't. And I respectfully disagree with you. I don't want to sound like that. But I want my kids, not all are high achieving, to take that Regents exam. I want them to know it's serious. I want you to do well on it, and you have to try.
Right.
Not all do.
The pool of kids that I'm
Not
talking
all of
about,
your
though,
kids.
Right, but the pool of kids that I'm talking about, the ones that are really affected
Oh,
by
sure.
this, are those high-level kids who are motivated anyway. And if you said to my son, this test counts 20% and not 10%, he's not going to approach it any differently. He's just not. And I think he's not alone. I think there are a lot of kids who are taking honors classes who are high-level kids who, they're self-motivated, and the amount that the score
There are
counts is
some
not going to change
self-motivated.
them. And I think for, these group of kids who are scoring very well in their classes, but not so much even making mastery on their Regents exams, I feel like that's a problem in and of itself, like I said before, and now that's counting towards their overall grade for the class.
Well, you've hit on a controversial topic, as you said. Our neighbors over there who have an 8% participation rate, 8 in grades 3 through 8, who was a proponent of opting out, now wants to have it not count the final exam at all. Okay?
Mike, just
Unless it helps us
to your
to.
question a little bit. There are so many variables in that process, it would be virtually impossible to level the playing field for everybody. Even AP exams. There are schools that start 2 months before us, a month before us, and we're all taking that test on the same day. They're a month, 2 months ahead of us instructional-wise, and our kids are still taking that test on the same day as they are. So to even say AP exams is an assessment or a vehicle that compares students apple to apples, it really isn't, because they're getting instruction for that course 2 months before us.
The instruction part isn't what I'm really saying, apples to apples. At the end of the day, you have to take the SAT, ACT. You have to have mastery of those subjects. And the only way to see how you compare to other people is how you do on the tests that are similar in aspect. I can take a class here, and I can take a class in wherever Verizon said. That teacher may grade me a much higher student, so I'm thinking I'm a 90 there.
Oh, absolutely.
And over here I'm a 70, but that doesn't mean that the grade in that class means anything. I could know more, but the teacher's much tougher here than over there. The only way I know if I know more information than the other one is when we take the Regents. Hey, I did better, I know more than that child, and when I take the SAT or the ACT, hopefully, it follows through and you do much better on those tests because you do know, or if I do really bad on the Regents, hey, I need to toughen myself up and learn more on that.
We're having a debate on the weight of Regents exams when some schools don't pay attention to them. There's a lot of other factors that are involved in your college acceptance or where you're accepted.
But these are all the components that committee is.
Right. So the committee is going.
I know.
So,
like
and
I said-
parents who want it lowered are on that committee.
Well, there's one parent, right? And there's a PTA rep and one parent who are.
That one parent represents like 20 people.
2 parents.
Well, there's one PTO rep, right?
But you know what? And
then-
teachers are,
Right.
and it's an interesting discussion, but some teachers are going with the Storm Wading River model, which is there's a different weight for different subjects. Okay, so that's in the mix. They're all over the place. Should we count at 10, 12, 15, 20? But, you know, it's hard to argue with a lot of success. Granted, you're talking about mastery rate. But we have been successful on the Regents exams, whether it's the open enrollment in AP, I'm sure that affects it. But our kids are successful. And I think some, not your high achievers, know it's 20% and they want to do well on it. And teachers want to do well because the principals, he is, and his teachers are evaluated by the results on that Regents exam.
Whether or not the kids pass, right? That's what they're evaluated on the pass rate, not the mastery
But
rate.
still, if you lower it, if it's 0, it doesn't count, or every kid going to try his best? I doubt it. I doubt it. So the debate continues.
Respectfully, I
I
disagree.
think you can't discredit too, like that same kid who maybe will be less motivated because you made it 0%. When he hears that 3 questions were thrown out because, or whatever changed because
The
they
geometry.
didn't really do it right, to me, that would be more disheartening for the kid who worked and worked and worked, and then more so than a 0% rather than a 20%. I think those are the kids that you are going to say like, well, they couldn't even do it right. So, you know what I mean? I think you can't discredit that either. There's a lot of different things
Well,
that go into
That
this.
question about, you know, not knowing to take the Regents over if you want to, it depends on the kid.
Right.
But I'll tell you where I was prior, we always recommended kids take the Regents as many times as they felt they wanted. We even had alternative kids going for masters and taking it 3 times.
But that is not part of the culture here, and I know in other districts it is. Like I said, in Comac, where my
Doesn't
niece-
matter, it's a culture, your child has the right to take it.
But teachers don't tell you that. Teachers are not telling these kids.
Yeah, nobody's told that.
Nobody is told that if you get an 83 on the geometry exam, you should take it again and try for mastery. They're not told that. I think that our teachers do a disservice to our kids in that regard, because you have to identify your group of kids who really could be benefiting from shooting for mastery. Yeah, they've passed, we didn't expect that they wouldn't pass, but they're not performing on that exam the way they're performing in the class. And there's some high stakes there for these kids, and I believe they should be encouraged to take it again. I mean, like I said before, I couldn't even really get a straight answer as to whether or not it mattered if my kid took it again. And I've been trying to get an answer to that question since June. And so it's now been answered for me tonight, but it's difficult. Our course offerings online, where we list what our diplomas are that are available, I don't believe it's fully updated. I don't think it tells you on there, unless I'm reading it wrong, it does not tell you on there that there are distinctions for mastery. These are issues for me. There
Well,
needs,
we can absolutely take a look and add it if it's not.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question. I mean, we're talking about the assessments with the K-2 assessments, the Terra Novas. Is there a reason why we haven't received those?
That's done through the elementary school. It doesn't go through me. We store everything through my office that we reported on. The Terra Novas are something that we do just as a district to see how our students are doing. I don't.
We normally get
report
those
should have
results in
gotten-
July, and we haven't gotten them yet.
They didn't come out this year. They should have gotten it.
Hi.
Sorry,
You should have them momentarily. We were apologized to by Terra Nova. They said they were sending them out late. There was an apology. I heard October, as you know, October is almost done. But you should be getting them very soon.
Okay.
Did you get the booklet that they sent with all the students?
Yes, I think the parent results should be out.
Okay.
any minute.
So we did get the results, but apparently not the parent report.
Okay.
Like, we get the ISRs from BOCES for the 3 through 8 assessments. Those are mailed out.
Okay.
Those were done, I think, in August when we got this.
So if they can take the regions over, can they take the APs over too?
You can take an AP, then take the course, you can challenge it. College board.
We've had students take AP exams without ever having taken the course.
Why can't they?
Okay, we're going to turn to the rest of the meeting. This time, thank you for the questions, and look into a lot of that.
So that said, are there any questions on the agenda anybody would like to ask? Okay. We'll start on personnel. Keith, do you need the first one?
Sure. Three resignations. Number one, family consumer science teacher. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Rosemary Messina, part-time family and consumer science teacher, effective October 21st, 2017. Second.
Thank you, Mike. It's unusual to have a resignation in the beginning of the school year, but Ms. Messina found a full-time job. She was a .6 teacher here, so she has left us, and so now we are hopefully replacing her as soon as we can, but just to give you a heads up on that. Any other comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. District 8?
School District 8, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation for retirement purposes of Doreen Darcy, school district aid effective December 9th, 2017.
Thank you, Mike. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Ed, school district aid?
Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Sandy Bombay's school district aide effective September 21st, 2017.
Ed?
Second.
Pete, any comments? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Mike, substitute teachers?
Sure, substitute teachers, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following appointments as listed.
I'll second that.
Rob, comments? We have a retiree coming back, Mrs. Amato, and Todd is a former Mount Sinai student, so keeping it in the family. Any comments, questions? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Bob?
School district aid, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following appointment for Janelka Turpin, October 30th, 2017, school district aid, step 1.
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Pete, co-curriculum?
Co-curricular clubs advisors, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby authorizes the following co-curricular clubs and appoints the persons listed below as advisors for the 2017-18 school year as listed.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ed. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Action items, Karen? Sure.
Committee on Special Education, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education has no objections to the following special education recommendations and approves the authorization for the funds to implement the special education programs and services consistent with such.
Second.
Thank you, Pete. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Ed, action items, external audit?
Action items, business.
We're going to be taking out the purple single order.
Wait, what?
We're going to be taking out your purple single order.
In the middle of the paragraph.
Oh, all right.
Wasn't completed.
Thank you.
External audit report. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby accepts the independent audit report of the general purpose financial statements, including the reports on compliance and internal audit, and the audit of extra classroom activity fund as submitted by the firm of Cullen and Danowski LLP for the school year July 1st, 2016 through June 30th, 2017, and further accepts the corrective action plan as submitted by the Assistant Superintendent for Business.
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Any comments?
I have a couple of comments. I don't want it to go past the community, the comments that Jill offered with regards to how our district on the business side runs. I think it's very important for us to understand how Linda runs the business side of our operation. I've had the pleasure of working with her coming on 7 years, and every year, what they call an action plan here is these minor, little items that have no real risk to us whatsoever. In a $57 million budget, that's pretty extraordinary. I would like to compliment Linda on that, and I think not to say that publicly, I would be amiss. I'd also like to point out that in that report, we are running at a 1.5% of income with a pocketbook that we're spending more than that, almost 10% more. Something to pay attention to. We're not living within our means. We're spending more than we're taking in, even though we're trying to maintain taxes, and we've got a little bit more in state aid. It's important to recognize that as we go forward.
Any other comments? All in favor? Oh, sorry.
I want to
Okay.
just also second Bob's comments regarding Linda. I've worked in a number of school districts. I encounter assistant superintendents business all the time, and I will say one thing: in that $56 million budget that we have, Ms. Jensen has every answer of every question I've ever thrown at her, and and I haven't been able to stump her yet. I'm going to keep trying. But I think she does a very good job. I think the people in this community should be very happy they have a true professional managing their money.
Here, here.
Here is right. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Annual risk, Mike.
Sure. Annual risk assessment. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby accepts the internal audit report on cash receipts and the annual risk assessment update as submitted by the firm of Lizzie Schwartz Interakis for the 2016-17 school year, and further accepts the corrective action plans as submitted.
Second.
Rob, any comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Bob, obsolete?
Obsolete equipment, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby declares the following items as listed as obsolete and further authorized disposal as listed.
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Keep donation.
Donation. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, Board of Education hereby accepts the donation of 20 pairs of Cliff Keen headgear for wrestlers valued at approximately $700 from a community resident and actually my former classmate in Port Jeff High School, Antonio Ujiri. What I would say is, Antonio, and if you're watching this, you should have spent a little more. Thank you very much, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Antonio. Any other comments? Oh, we need a second. Thanks, Mike. Comments? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. All right, we're at the end of the agenda, and now we are open to any questions from our communities.
Actually, this is easy. On the agenda, there was a superintendent's report. Was your report the assessment results, or did you have a separate report?
No, that was my superintendent's
Okay.
message.
Thank
Did you want to hear more?
I just wanted to make sure that it was
Kind
a
of
separate line
assessed out.
item, so I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
I'll write you a special one tomorrow.
I got some stuff for you guys.
Thanks, Brad.
You're welcome.
Is this regarding the complex?
This is regarding a bunch of different things, actually. And I brought copies for you guys.
The best. Are they double-sided?
Of course they are.
It's easy.
So we'll start with the easy one first. The property that's on 125A right by the school entrance, that's been asked for a while. That plan has been submitted to the town to develop that. And because it's right next to school, I want you guys to be aware of it. The plan is to get rid of all the stuff that's there and put two buildings there, probably medical type buildings. So there'll be one right along Gertrude Goodman Drive and one along 25A with a parking lot behind those buildings. And on the corner, I have a little planting area.
Kind of attached to those piles of dirt and rocks.
Yeah, it'll get rid of all the piles of dirt.
So they'll use part of the school entrance?
No, well, the entrance will be on 25A, but the way the buildings are situated, one will be on 25A, and one will follow the curve around the road and be situated on, not on 25A,
But it wouldn't impact or?
no, it shouldn't impact, but it will look nicer. So that's these plans.
Okay.
You guys can come up with that.
That's just a proposal, or that's...
That's what's been submitted to the town as a proposal. It's not final. The Civic is looking at it to just make sure that there's no other recommendations that we have. But the planning board is looking at that proposal.
But it's within the zoning.
It's within the zone, yes.
So
It's as of right, they're not asking for any zoning changes, correct? Next, Gordon, I sent you earlier in the month some of the projections of the students for the Mount Sinai Meadows project. I don't know if you had a chance to share that with the board.
I have to look at it again.
I brought a copy of it. But Mr. Sweeney, after, at last month's board meeting, we talked about some of the costs and the assumptions. So I went back and I did some calculations on the estimated amount of tax that Mount Sinai Managed project would generate, and the number of students, and then what they're assuming is the fully loaded cost to the district. So you had mentioned that our district cost is $17,000 per student. Right. So I came up with the calculations, and according to how many students they're projecting, the tax revenue due to the school district, they're coming up with $17,147 per student cost. So their estimates seem to be tracking with what we're discussing. So I have a copy of that. I also
And
brought.
that's just, since you're on that topic, that's based on the assumption that they're using as a number of students who are going to be residents there.
Yes.
Because they're assuming that two-bedroom homes are not going to be used by parents who have students in the school district. That district and better school districts around to be resident. You're a resident, you're paying taxes on it. So I think, without repeating it, their assumption is somewhat lacking credibility.
Flawed.
The number is 17, it comes out even. It is what it is, but they're defining it by a false number.
Yeah, well, because you guys asked how they arrived at that number, I got their report. I have copies for you guys, and I'll look at how they got to those assumptions, the metrics they used, and the bona fides of the people that came up with the numbers. So I thought that was important for you guys to see. Now, I read through their report, and I noticed some flaws in how they have described certain things. So the civic board is going to be meeting with the representatives of the developer and people who put together a report in the fairly near future. And we're going to discuss with them their plan, the number of students, the mix of two-bedroom, one-bedroom, et cetera. Because as it is right now, the 106 two-bedroom is not acceptable.
It's now 106, 90 for two bedrooms.
That's the original proposal to us when it actually was submitted. To
So
the
it's
town.
less one bedrooms, and one bedrooms would be about 34.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're saying about 20% of the two bedrooms are going to have children.
Yeah.
22 the numbers.
All of you know what we're talking about with the construction going on.
So they're saying
One of
20%
proposed
of those units would have be occupied with children.
Yeah, they're saying
Roughly.
that there would be 20 infants and 24 school-age children in the two bedrooms.
So roughly 40%. They're saying only 40% of the units would be occupied with children. Correct. Two bedrooms.
So they had to change that number too.
Yeah, and so it was. they
Originally
said
27.
Yeah, so it's based on that 106. But we think, there's a lot more kids in the two bedrooms. So the civic's position is estimating two bedrooms from each resident. And we're going to discuss that with you.
Well, number one, there's no way you can legally require Mount Sinai residents in these apartments, correct?
No.
So that they can come from anywhere, yet one of the driving factors behind the approval of it was a lot of Mount Sinai people sell their homes, have nowhere to go if they do. So they go there, or students wanting to return to live in Mount Sinai would go to this apartment complex.
Yes.
Yet the reasonable prices can certainly draw in people from many other areas that we have no control over.
Yeah, and it's stressed in this report again, and the developer has discussed repeatedly that their plan is to target these apartments to millennials with an expectation, and even in this report it says these numbers are kind of the highest outside number that they think students will be there, but based on their marketing plan, they expect far fewer. I'm not sure I agree with that, but that's their contention.
Well, you know, we have concerns about that number, maybe even the 47, but that number increased dramatically from 27 to 47. Infants grow up into kindergarten.
That is true. So that 27 was school age.
So we're in the red no matter how you look at it.
So we have concerns about that. We're going to be discussing with the developer those concerns and try to get something
Yeah, it seems his story's changing.
Whatever, if there's any point where I can be of any help, I'd be happy to chat with you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there recourse? I mean, I don't know that there is, and you would know it's better, once this is built, and if those numbers completely are way off, and there are so many more school-age kids here, what's the recourse for?
There really isn't. There really isn't.
So it's got to be.
There's no way to legally put in, we can't have
Insurance
children.
practice they want. No, I'm not saying that, but my question is then how is it getting corrected on the front end, and aside from what you're doing now, to put something in that, you know?
I don't know that there is, because the tax base is the tax base based on the type of properties and how the taxes are charged.
They're trying to minimize the
When you're
numbers
looking
like
at
to
the
sell.
tax base between a rental property versus a co-op property versus a condo property, there is a difference. And it's just math. And once it's there, it is what we're going to live with. Look, there is a problem here with the ability to have our children have a place that they can transition through. Anyone travel in the South, you go to, I'll call them planned communities, if you will. There are apartments that are in the same complex as attached homes, as unattached homes. Long Island's never thought of that. So while I don't want personally to object to using this property for what may be a good use, there has to be some recognition of the tax consequence and the cost consequence to educate the children. If we simply use a two-bedroom model and say half those apartments have children, we're now at 53 children, not 47. I don't think it's fair for the school district and the community to subsidize that apartment complex for the profit of the development. And that's really what it is, because you can charge more for a two-bedroom apartment than you can charge for a one-bedroom.
Sure. And the civic's sensitive to that, and we're concerned about that too, so that's why we're going to be discussing with them. And the town has told the developer 106 two-bedroom apartments is not enough. They told the flat that they rejected it already.
I frankly, you're the messenger, I don't think the town particularly has any real interest or care about the school district. We're a second thought to them, so.
To a degree, yes, but Councilwoman Barr is sensitive to these kinds of things, in my opinion.
She gets away.
So,
I'm not a friendly guy.
so they understand, from my perspective, and being part of the civic, they're concerned about those kinds of things that the impact has on the community. So they've already rejected that.
And honestly, if they are trying to appeal to the millennials, two-bedroom apartments is not what they need to have it.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that either, and that's part of that discussion that we're having.
I think their answer was it would be roommate situation. I think their response back to that very question of why two bedrooms was they would have roommates and split the cost of a two-bedroom.
They go to kindergarten. Fred, I said it last time, I appreciate it. You are an excellent voice of the community. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing the meeting to us.
Just a couple other things, because I know everybody wants to go home and celebrate the game, Victor. But I brought some meeting minutes from that meeting where the developer presented, so you guys can have them and refer to them. And then I also brought, one copy of the covenants for that property, what they have to do, and the potential community benefit and how that was set up to be broken down, so you guys can thank you. And then lastly, the property on 25A adjacent to the ranches that's currently vacant.
Which was the medical.
Yes, the congregate care retirement community. That's the piece of property that was set aside to be revenue generating as a result of a lawsuit from the ranches and the animal. There's an interested party that has purchased it. They have submitted plans to the town that are basically right in line with what the settlement says they have to do. It's going to be built, proposed to be built as a Bristol, and that is going to be 220 units of independent senior rental housing and 120-bed assisted living facility. So there will be no children there.
You hope.
Well, it's for 55 and older. The average age that lives in Bristol communities with a 55 and older is 65 to 70.
Billy Joel's having a second child at 68. I just have to mention that.
But that's moving along, and that will be revenue generating. We don't know how much the tax is projected to be. We asked the developer to find that out and provide it to us, but we haven't gotten to know when we find out. Okay?
I always appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Perfect. Thank you. Anything else today?
I'm Mike Fabio, this is my wife Janine.
Welcome.
Mr. Bravo, nice to meet you in person. I talked to you on the phone. We're here to talk about our son, Christian. He's currently in 10th grade. He has had a passion since he was 5 years old, and that's aviation. Okay? We've been told that they don't allow or they don't provide for kids to go to BOCES that are not, quote, special needs. We're requesting that he is allowed to go because it has been his passion since he's been 5 years old. He basically started we were down in Florida at an airport. He saw a pilot. He walked over to him at 5 years old and talked to him for over an hour while the flight was delayed about engines, about this, about that, about planes. When we boarded the plane, the pilot actually took him into the cockpit because he saw how much he loved it when he was there. Okay?
Then he was in 5th grade, and there was a brochure, and it was an aero camp over in Barca Airport. And quite honestly, I'm like, you're in 5th grade, you're not going to fly a plane, are you crazy? And he put the brochure on his desk, and every month he hounded us to say, Mom, could I go next year? Could I go next summer? Could I go next summer? Well, I gave in, but I was a little nervous to tell you the truth. They did all kinds of things involving different
Careers
in aviation, and he found a passion for flying. He was 11 years old. 12 years old, I'm sorry.
So that was the basic camp. Then there was a week prior to an advanced camp. He wanted to go, but the advanced camp was only from 9th grade to 12th grade.
Here he is in 6th grade.
He was in 6th grade. We went to the VP of Mid-Island Air, and we asked her, and she said with his knowledge and his love for it, she let him go in it. And he flew his first plane at age 12. Okay, assessment. It's grown since then. I mean, he has such an admiration for flying, and he wants to make it his career. The main problem is it's not offered here. And they have a program over in BOCES for this. Last year, he was only 9th grade, and going for 10th and 11th graders, but we took him to BOCES there to meet the instructors and see how he would respond. Well, the instructors loved him. They cannot wait. They're hoping that he goes there because of the love that he has for it. And, not being able to go would crush him.
And just to give you an insight, he was the youngest member, the first youth member of the Flight School of America. He was written up in a brochure, which we have. He was in Youth Day. This is not something that he's just thinking he might want to do. We have conversations, we're driving in the car, and all of a sudden he'll be like, Mom, this is a Bombardier plane, and it has this kind of engine, blah, 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 and he recognizes it. This is a true passion. And we discussed it with with Mr. McAvoy in 8th grade. This conversation started. We took it to Mr. Dialogue. We took it to Mr. Grable. We took it to Mr. Bromsdale. Everybody's telling us it can't be done. Our question to you is, how do you destroy a child's dream when this is not offered? It's a New York State program that he would benefit from. School is about developing a career, and his passion is flying. You don't offer that. How could you turn around and say you don't have the financial ability to send him, or it's only for the learning disabled? It's a little bit discriminatory.
I mean, he knew from 7th grade what he wanted to do. I want you to find kids in 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, that at that point, they know what they want to do in their career. I'm sure there's not many, okay, who know from 7th grade what they want to do for their life, okay? He was talking about colleges, Embry-Riddle down in Florida,
Purdue.
the #1 flight school, Purdue,
South Dakota,
all of them.
Minnesota,
Okay.
Minneapolis.
He's looking these up.
7th grade, I
Seventh
was on
grade.
that Navion, so we're going through all the different schools. Not too many kids in 7th grade know what they're doing.
And he's looking at what qualifications he needs to do this, okay, at 7th grade, which, we're putting in things in the budget like lights for a football game and things like that. That's not something a career builder. I want to see how many, no disrespect to football game, I want to see how many of those kids that turn pro and have a career in that. This is a real career. This is down the road. How many pilots are going to be needed? How many people in all these fields are going to be needed in aviation? We don't have it here. So why can't we allow kids, if they want to do something, to better their career and go for their career? Instead of saying, no.
I understand. At first, your son sounds amazing, and I understand your passion to have him reach his dream and his goal. I can only give you the backstory of when BOCES was taken off the table back in 2012 when the New York State ruled that we have a tax cap and that school districts had to stay within the tax cap or pierce the budget. That particular year, Mount Sinai tried to pierce the budget, it didn't go through, so cuts had to be made, and unfortunately, that was one of the items that was taken off the block, 2012.
However, there were some students that have been in BOCES according to instruction and aviation. So
Wait, say that again?
they had told us that they had students from Mount Sinai in BOCES
It was
for
a student
aviation.
had an IEP, that was the only program.
But that's
was
discriminatory. IEP is a discriminatory fact. My son, he's on the president's principal's list all of last year. He gets discriminated against because he doesn't have a special need. You can't have a special need in the aviation program.
Honestly, I'm not debating. I do not disagree with that. I'm just telling you what the law is. And the law requires us, if there's an IEP written for a student, that he or she gets sent to whatever program is least restrictive for them. That is the law. It's a federal and state law. So that said, there are 7 of us up here. We were elected as your trustees. There are 7 different opinions on this, but the majority, we speak as one voice, felt that financially we were not in a position to offer BOCES.
Well, we can offer lights for a football game. How does that make sense? That you're going to destroy someone's, what he wants to do for a career.
And ruin his
But
high
we'd
school
rather
education
because
he
it
knows
looks,
that's what he
because it
wants to
looks
do.
better for our school that we have a Friday night football game or a Thursday night football game. That looks better than saying, we're going to push students ahead. We've been preaching all night about helping students, making them better, pushing them. And now,
Because he doesn't have an IEP, he can't go.
right, we're going to say, you're a great student, but we want to keep you here because we don't want to do that. That's unfair. That's discriminatory. That's just saying you can only be a special needs person to be able to go there.
If it was your son or daughter, Kevin, Jacob, your twins, how would you feel?
What would you say that Kevin wants to be a veterinarian? Doesn't be offered here. Sorry, Kevin. Your career is crushed. How could you do that?
Yes,
I appreciate the both of you coming down because we had heard about this for a while. Gordon has spoken to us. Lynn has mentioned that 2011 and prior, this district had two populations that did go to BOCES. The special needs, as you would say, and the Committee on Special Education in an IEP made that recommendation. Whether or not you agree that it's fair or not, there is a state law that says if this committee on special education makes a ruling, that's what the ruling is.
Do you have that law so we can say it?
I don't.
Did you present it to us at the next meeting?
Sure.
Because I also got state mandate.
I have a mandate.
I have a state mandate that says you cannot stop us from doing it.
IDEA states that children must be offered services in the least restrictive environment. So for those children, the programs of BOCES would be considered.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about it. I'm
Well,
talking
that's
about
the
my
law that
son.
they're referring to.
There's a state mandate that we included in here that I highlighted. That said,
Okay, get it, Mike, let him talk.
So again, prior to this time, 2011, we had two populations. The first population that I mentioned, which is students who it's required in their IEP. And then we also had a second population of what you could call general education students who may not have fit in high school, or maybe, like you said, they had a passion to do something else. Our administrators were the ones making the recommendation. There was an application process to determine the other students. So we were okay with that, and that's what we did. Before becoming a board member, like Lynette mentioned, the state imposed a tax cap, and since then there have been a number of changes. Bob mentioned earlier in this meeting about the increase in revenue that we have, 1.3, the increase in expenditures, 10%. So at that time, we had to make a decision. 2011, and BOCES for general education students was one of the things that was taken off the table. Now, when this was brought to us, we thought, and I'll tell you what, I'm a parent. I'm a parent of a daughter who goes to this school, and I empathize in what you're saying. I truly do. And I thought about this, and Lynn and I even had a conversation with our principal, Mr. Gray, and we asked him about this because he's the expert. Gordon is our superintendent. He's an education expert. And if our principal, I said to him, tell me what you feel about this. And he said, there are certain kids that this may benefit. And he goes, if financially the district can do it, then it's something I would recommend. So we as a board get this information, but we also have to make decisions, financial decisions. And I understand you're upset. You can say that we might put in lights on a football field and that's discriminatory against your son, or how does that help? But we try to make decisions as a whole for the whole population of students. And I will tell you this right now on camera, if we were in a better financial situation, we would have BOCES for general ed. And I'm sure your son would probably be in it. But at this point, we estimate that in 3 years out, we could have major issues in this school. And there could be programs that are being cut, bigger programs that affect all of the students as opposed to one. And so we have to make a decision, and that's what we made it on. I can totally respect that you're here, and I'm glad you actually came to voice it. It's good that as a board we hear these things. The lady in the back was talking about, hey, my son or daughter should be taking the Regents again for mastery. It's good that we hear these things. Again, I've heard this, and again, I think if we were in a different financial position, I would be happy to say, yeah, we're going to open this back up for 4 or 5 students a year based on the advice our administrators have given us. And I know it breaks your heart because your son sounds like an awesome kid, and this is what he wants to do.
Yeah,
but we can't always make decisions based on just one child.
But it might not be one child. If you open it up, I guarantee you, as I'm standing here, I guarantee you there's going to be more than one child
And don't
that
you
wants
get
to do
money
different
as
things.
surplus from BOCES
Okay.
as well?
It's interesting to listen. I was here when it was done. I had to make those decisions. In 2011, it wasn't driven simply by finances. It's not, I think, 100%. education, and we did a calculation based on the cost per student. In addition to that, there was a transportation cost, driven by two reasons. One, BOCES CTE program was also losing state aid back in 2011. Their cost of doing it was increasing, so they moved, and they were eliminating, moving, and changing, and their whole CTE program was in flux. It became very concerning to us whether or not we were going to continue to commit to that. But we did a multi-level analysis of it, and that's what I'm not hearing here. What's the cost of transportation? How many kids would be interested in it? And what's the program like now? Because the program, the CTE program, BOCES, has changed over the past 7 years. And I'm not so sure we're in the same position. We are in a difficult financial position, but are we in the same position we were in 2011? And the analysis, at least to my knowledge, has been limited to we cut it. Everything that comes, we look at and look at again, we're willing to spend money on things. We spend money on things like a bureaucracy. The answer may still be no. In my opinion, I'm just saying as one person, I don't know what the transportation is. Do you know what happened in 2011? It used to be over at Calabro, and classes were in Patrick. And then they moved it to their main building. And the kids had to be transported from different locations. They had to take some of their classes in one place, then they had to be transported to another place for the academic side, if you will, the engineering side of the aviation, and then the actual hands-on work. And it was all charged back to the district. The program became very expensive. I don't know what it is now. Did they change it? Have they improved it? There's multiple CTE programs there. And what are the opportunities? At this point, I don't know what it is. I know what we did in 2011, and I don't know what we should do now, because I don't know what the cost is. I don't know what the transportation is. Back then, we even had parents who said, we don't want the transportation. So I'm going to voice, I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know what the cost is. And as you say, I don't know how many, you're the parents coming forward, I don't know how many kids are interested in it. But when we did this, we tried to do it as a fair process, and we looked at the number of students in the program and did a calculation as a cost per student. So we felt that was the fairest way to do it. The more students that were involved, the less it cost. That's what it came down. I don't know what BOCES is going to charge us. I don't know what the cost of the transportation is. And that may be something that you look at before you just say no.
Okay, so let's have a conversation with the director of BOCES. We'll invite him in to speak with the board, and so we can get up to speed on it. So until that time, it's really hard to, make any kind of determination. So I think we can probably get Tom McGrath, who's a community member and principal over there, to come in to speak with us, and we'll have that conversation. And then Mr. Reiser will report. Is that reasonable?
That's a start. That's reasonable, yeah. It's better than a flat out no.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because this is, like I said, something,
Passion.
passion.
The newspaper, we showed you everything.
We thank you for coming.
We got a letter from even the head of Mid-Island Air about him, about his accomplishments and everything he's done.
And
it's,
and not for anything, we've been talking to Mr. Grable since last year with numbers of students. If it's not offered, how do you really know the number of students that are going? So we have to kind of make that a little bit more concrete.
and
And
open it
not
up to the
just
students.
talk and address it.
Even Ms.
because
McAvoy has
This is
said
not
the same
really
thing.
making sense on a whole picture. I understand you have budgetary needs and obligations that you want to fulfill and keep it tight and the school district's running, and I commend you for what you do. But it has to just be investigated a little bit further.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're starting that conversation.